Hi, I'm Dr. Jodi Medell. I am an integrative health and functional medicine practitioner with over 30 years of clinical experience as a physical therapist. So welcome. Today we're going to have a conversation talking about survival as personality. So I think it's a deep dive into a really interesting conversation today. You know, as I said, I've spent more than 30 years helping people heal. And a topic that's come up many times over the years, and something that's just been bugging me, is why is it that some people continue to push and push really hard, even through multiple adversities and injuries and whatnot, long after other people would have simply stopped and changed direction? I thought it was discipline. I thought it was grit. I thought it was resilience. And then I found out I was wrong. So, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. I've always been driven. Driven to the point where, I'm just going to tell you my schedule for the day. I get up at 3 so that I can do my first workout from 3:30 to 4:35. Depending on how long I want to run, it's my run of the morning. I come back home, have my coffee, meditate. I actually do meditate after having my coffee because my coffee is only 4 ounces of really weak coffee, but I'm like a whole cup of frothed, fresh almond milk that I make. So it's my decadence of the morning. After my meditation, I go out for my second workout, which is another hour to hour and a half workout, which is either mountain biking, gravel grinding, my core stability workout, or my strength training workout. And then I go to work and work all day. Obviously not on the weekends. And so on the weekends, I'll play even longer with all the things that I do. And actually on the weekends, I go for an additional hike with my dog up high in the mountains. So anyway, by mid-morning, especially on the weekends, I've already accomplished all of my errands, my grocery shopping, my house cleaning, my whatevers, right? So when most people are just rolling out of bed, I've already accomplished a day. And I don't stop there. I keep going. And so that's just how I do life, right? So in some ways, I'm kind of beyond driven. As a kid, starting in fourth grade, I started playing piano, and I would wake up at 5 a.m. so I could practice piano for an hour before I went to school. I was a 4.0 plus student until college, and even in college was valedictorian for my undergraduate degree. So I've always pushed and pushed really hard. And that's just what I thought, who I thought I was. I've put it into my running. Became a competitive runner at the age of 25 when got an injury mountain biking, so I couldn't mountain bike for a while, and got turned on to running. And now I go between mountain biking and running and other things depending on the time of year. But being in constant motion has become a deep part, true part of my personality, my identity. Achieving, having high achievements has also become a big part of my identity. And being in the healing profession, where I get to work with people and help people on their healing journey, has become part of my identity. And I really thought that's who I was. But then life happened, continued to happen, and my body, as well as just circumstances in my life, eventually started to tell me another story. My migraines kept returning. Menopause happened and my energy levels were different. I had my child at the age of 40. My body changed a lot. My sleep cycle got disrupted completely. I used to be able to just show up and go fast and hard and not stop. And all of a sudden that just wasn't quite working for this girl anymore. I had to really work focus on my diet, my hormones, my inflammatory levels in my system. And I just wasn't recovering like I used to. And that realization was that my physiology, my body, actually knew a lot more about what was going on with me than my mind did. Because my mind just wanted to take everything and shove it into another area that I could push hard into. But my physiology was saying, you can't keep doing that. So this is kind of a little intro, but I'm going to bring up a patient that just gave me, I guess, a deeper aha and another reason to share these stories. So in another video, I kind of brought up this patient, but this patient came to me because he had shoulder pain and a twitch on his left side. And he happens to be not quite 40 yet, very accomplished, PhD, came from poverty, came from very little in life, and became a very driven, successful, accomplished individual. Not only does he work as a PhD in a well-known facility, he's also doing his own startup because he has these incredible ideas. This is a man who doesn't sleep. He lives off of 4 or 5 hours of sleep every night. His mind is always on, always working. And you know what? He loves it. He loves it. His nervous system is on overdrive and he loves it. To tell him to stop, to breathe, to meditate, to hang out, to chill, to him feels like wasted time. Why would you do that when you've got all these incredible ideas and amazing things that you can do in life? But he is now dealing with a nervous system that's not quite supporting his drive, right? He's got this twitch, he's got these aches and pains in his shoulder, and he's realizing at some level, even if it's at a gut level, but his physiology too is telling him, you can't keep that drive up. Although his mind is telling him, yes, you can, just shift directions. So, what this taught me is that if you look at kind of his story and my story, a lot of the drive has come from survival. The tie that binds here is that we both came from adversity with our childhood. And in our childhood, what we learned were great coping mechanisms. What we learned was to put our nervous system into overdrive, into sympathetic nervous system overdrive with hypervigilance, an inner critic that told us we had to work harder, stronger, faster, and we couldn't stop. We leaned in, and that's what we did. But as much as that was survival, and as much as that made us accomplished human beings, yeah, we couldn't escape survival. We just mastered it. So what is it if survival that brought us up to a certain level in life, what if it doesn't disappear? It simply changes the clothes it wears. It simply has a different presentation. As children, survival looks like hypervigilance, being a really good kid, being super accomplished, being that 4.0 student, getting everything done. But as adults, we transfer it and it looks like achievement, perfectionism, productivity, responsibility, being the strong one, never ever asking for help, never stopping, never resting. And guess what? People applaud it. People think it's great We get kudos for that behavior. However, the body simply can't keep it up. You know, I don't think anyone ever expressed it to me that way. So part of this, when we look at the nervous system, and again, I've said repeatedly that the nervous system is so underlooked as a piece of our healing process. Those of us who have come from adversity, and the reaction to that is to be super driven, that means that our sympathetic nervous system goes into overdrive. That's our fight or flight response. It can be on a high level and it can be on a lower level, but still it becomes the predominant way that we do life. We have an on button, we do have an off button, but we've forgotten about it and we don't use it. However, if you look at any mechanical thing in life, I'm going to use a plane as an example. When that plane takes off to fly us from point A to point B, do you think it just drops us down, goes up, and flies somebody else? No, it has to stop and rest, undergo maintenance, get repaired, have a check done to make sure it's safe so that it can fly again. But those of us caught in sympathetic dominance go, we hardly rest, we go again. The only thing that stops us is if we truly get sick, injured, hurt, whatever. And even then, we shift gears in our mind so that we're still busy somehow, even if it's not physically, because we got to be productive. Rest just doesn't play in our minds at all. So, one of the things that we really have to talk about is how can we feel safe shifting from sympathetic dominance to parasympathetic nervous system state, not necessarily dominance, but into that state, which is our rest and digest state. For most of us, given that intense drive, that seems really awful. That's asking us to do something we simply can't wrap our arms around and do. So how do we get there? We'll continue on this conversation and hopefully you'll leave with some answers to that question. You know, we also have neuroplasticity within the brain. Again, for those of us who grew up in adversity, we have emotional and brain dysregulation. So that means that we're really quick to lose it. We don't really have that space between reactivity and responding because we've learned to react. That's that sympathetic overdrive. We've learned how to just be on all the time and react really quickly. And our brain then works that way. But with neuroplasticity, we can change that in our brain. We can change from being reactive to taking that breath, to holding that space, and then being able to respond. But again, I'm going to go back to safety. We have to create a space in our being that feels safe so that we are allowed to, we give ourselves permission to take that breath, hold that space, shift from reactivity to responding. So if we do an even deeper dive, we realize in our physiology, which talks to us before our mind does to let us know that things are off, that state of being when we're constantly on affects our hormones. That goes back to something called the HPA axis, which basically is at the heart of how our hormones are produced. If our HPA axis says we need to be in fight or flight and we need to be reactive all the time, it just cares about keeping us safe. It cares about protecting us. It doesn't care if our hormones are regulated. It doesn't care if we have a low grade or high grade inflammatory response in our system. And it really doesn't care if we have insulin resistance, we're gaining weight, and we don't have energy. Because those are on the parasympathetic side of life for the nervous system. And that's all about healing, recovery, digestion. That has nothing to do with escaping that lion, right? So we have to really listen into this physiology that is then an undercurrent driving why our body eventually can't keep up with that on button being on all the time. So I want to ask you a question. Who would you be if survival wasn't running your life? The beautiful thing is, and I've hinted on it already, is that our bodies aren't broken. Our nervous system, our whole physiology, our whole being is great at adaptation. In this process, our nervous system has learned survival, and it's done a great job of shifting the face it wears, the clothes it wears, however it shows up over the course of our life so that it kind of works for us. But if our nervous system can learn survival, it can also learn safety. So, I no longer really believe that healing begins when we find the perfect diet, the perfect supplement, the best exercise program. I truly believe that healing begins the moment we become super curious enough to ask a different question. Not what's wrong with me, but what happened that taught my body this was the safest way to live? Because the body is always adapting. It is always protecting. It's always trying to keep us alive. And our job is not to fight it. Our job truly is to understand the language of the body and to understand how it communicates with us. And maybe the greatest healing any of us can experience is discovering that survival was never our personality. It was simply a strategy that helped us make it this far. And guess what? Now we get to choose something different. Can't even get the words out because that makes me excited. Thank you for joining me.